everybody. Lovely to have you here today. Welcome to the PXO virtual meetup. And we'll just let everyone join and come on in. Hello, a few familiar faces. Lovely to see you. While we're just letting everyone in, would love to know, as usual, where you're logging in from today. And of course, what the weather is like, because essentially, I live in Scotland. The weather's generally always bad, and I live vicariously through everyone that joins the meetup. So hopefully you can let me know that there's sun somewhere. Cloudy but warm in Paris. Okay, that's a good start. Malta and very sunny. Excellent. Thank you. That makes my day. Amsterdam and not too wet, which is always a good thing for Amsterdam. Rain and grey in Copenhagen. I was there the other week and it was very similar. Croatia, very sunny, quite sunny in Croatia, lovely. Turning cloudy in Ellie. Rainy and cold in Denmark. Okay. Oh, yes, Gary is also in the Fife Riviera. Hi, Gary. Great weather. Cold and very sunny in Vienna, cloudy Stockholm, sunny in Lisbon. Okay, well, I've got a few places where I'm going next, obviously. Dunfermline, sunny in Dunfermline. What? That's down the road. Typical autumn day in Dusseldorf. Okay, fab. Sunny but cold in Sussex. Excellent. All righty. Excellent. Well, it's lovely to know that there is sun somewhere in the world, and that always makes a meetup for me. So lovely to have you join us. We're going to get into it, and I know we'll have a few more people sort of join as we get into the discussion. Today, our focus is all about not just creating value, but value that sort of drives impact. And I know one of our guests, Rahul, today, that's very important. So impact-driven value is what we're sort of looking at. So how do you actually get that to happen, and how do you actually measure it, and how do you also then drive that whole kind of value stream through your business? And the framework that we're looking at today is OKRs. And I think OKRs are a fantastic mechanism to help drive business agility, but you could also go about this in the very wrong way or a bad way. And that's what we're going to explore today. And I don't like to do that myself, because actually I always want to go to the experts when we talk about this topic. So today I have if you're going to talk OKRs, you've got to have these two guys basically in the meetup. And we're going to get to know them next. And today we've got basically the expert telling you the best practice, how you should go about it, what's the intention and what you're aiming for. And then we're going to have the person that's been there and done it recently and kind of can tell you what was it like in reality, and what did they learn on how to kind of really kind of make it work in your organization or your context. So without further ado, let's meet our special guests. Rahul, I'd love for you to say a few words about who you are and what you do.
Hey, Natal, and hi, everyone. Firstly, thanks for having me and for the kind words and the introduction. My name is Rahul. I am based in Berlin, Germany. I saw we had a couple of people from Germany. Great to see. What I do right now is I work with a company called Delivery Hero to make them more effective in terms of developing products through means of agility, OKRs, other things as well. So I'll leave it at that. Pleasure to meet you, and looking forward to talking more about OKRs today.
Fabulous. And by the way, Rahul's our expert. So he is the man when it comes to the knowledge when it comes to OKRs. And then we have our reality check in the room. Botho, could you say a few words?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much, Natal. And also thank you for having me. Hello, everyone. My name is Botho. I'm 29 years old, currently live in Amsterdam, also saw some people from Amsterdam. And I had to laugh about somebody saying in the chat that people who like OKR come from cloudy places. I think this is true. My background is in organizational psychology, but always had this deep interest in human interaction. Since then, I've been trying to solve that mystery. I'm working at TomTom at the moment. And for the ones who don't know, this is a map making and navigation company. And for the last 2 years, I've been helping them building kind of the OKR philosophy methodology from the ground up, which was an awesome ride. And I'm here to share some of that experience with you today.
Fantastic. Okay. And Rahul, I think you sold yourself short before. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and how you can help people in this space.
Sure. Yeah. So I like working with organizations, departments, teams, individuals, helping them with things like transformations, doing talks like the ones we're doing today, keynoting conferences, and also workshops that you can sign up for individually or as teams or as companies. So you can find all that on my website, which is displayed on your screen. Feel free to reach out to me as well, connect on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to chat and talk about how I can help you out. As well, I have a podcast, which Natal has joined us for an episode on Agile HR. So if you're interested in learning more about Agile and Lean topics, please check that out. It's called Agile Atelier on your favorite podcast app. And connect with me and tell me a bit more about your feedback and how you find it as well.
Fantastic. And for anyone that hasn't met me, I'm Natal Dank, and I head up learning, coaching, and community at PXO Culture. And I have been a kind of representative for bringing agile mindset, tools, and techniques into the world of HR, people, and culture. I wrote a book. And basically at PXO Culture, we help you look at how can you start to transform your team, your operating model, and also your people products to really build business agility. And in particular, what does that look like for your context? And that's what we're sort of really trying to explore today is how can OKRs be a mechanism to help you in that? But also some of the dangers of what can go wrong, I think actually links to some of the traditional approaches we've had to the world of HR. So if you think about how we've done performance management over the years, if you bring some of that kind of more traditional mindset in with OKRs, then I think that can actually set them up in the wrong way. So we'll explore some of these topics. And in particular, OKRs is a great kind of representation of kind of where we're going in the world of people, culture, and change, and how you can use some of these things in a new way to really build self-organization and kind of team accountability rather than sort of that more traditional top-down way of doing strategy and mission. At PXO Culture, we're very happy to announce that we've got our new bootcamp. So the bootcamp has come out of quite a lot of different programs that we've run with our clients, but also programs that we've done in the public arena as well. And everyone wanted a kind of zero to hero experience of Agile HR. And so this is what the bootcamp represents, and it's set down through a series of sprints. So if you're interested in that, do come and find out more at PXO and have a chat to me. And also, we do lots of meetups, as you all know, and we've got a few more in November, so we'll send a follow-up. So first of all, let's find out about what you are interested in when it comes to OKRs. So let us know a bit about who you are. So what's your role or your function? And then what's your interest in OKRs and business agility? So essentially, why are you here today? What's got you interested in this topic? Are you using OKRs or you want to? Is there discussion around them? So let us know a bit more so we can understand the focus for you today. Okay, so we've got HR director for a company that's been using OKRs for lean portfolio management. Okay, great. Transformation consultant, OKRs look great, but it seems complicated. So I hope you demystify it for us today. Excellent. We've got a transformation lead, need to develop an agile approach to OKRs for our change model. Great. Agile coach, need to know more about OKRs and the process to get more agility in my organization. Great. So using OKRs for social impact and nonprofits. Excellent. Very interesting. Hub people lead, curious about OKRs, have heard people mention them, but would like to know more on how to use them. Yeah. And we've got a head of HR using OKRs in our organization, want to learn more about how to use OKRs to drive mindset shift towards thinking about outcomes. And then we've got a few more, lots of people, Rahul and Botho, and got founders using OKRs at a small startup, but somehow I have the feeling this is splitting teams more than bringing them together. Okay, so that's a good one. And then we've got, we're in a company on its way to be more agile. I'm here to gather evidence of how to do that. And then we have a business partner, part of a global program team who is rolling out OKRs. We've just finished first alignment, setting OKRs, but now starting to work with it, looking for best practices and general view for HR. Excellent. All right. So lots of people kind of in the middle of rolling out OKRs in their organization, some kind of intrigued, how could this really help me? And then others maybe seeing OKRs not being as effective as they could be. So wanting to kind of learn the best hints and tricks. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Keep putting your kind of learning needs in there and we'll go back to those. So a lot of what we are looking at today is more and more I'm calling the new working paradigm. And this was already happening prior to the pandemic. There was a real kind of push and drive within organizations to start dealing with the complexity in which they're operating. So we saw, focus on how do we be more collaborative? How do we be more customer centric? And how do we start to really work in the network to drive that response to customer needs and be much more kind of adaptive to the world around us? And in many ways, this always sort of came back to a concept of business agility. Now, there's lots of different ways you can go about business agility. And I know when I speak to Rahul every time, he says, well, what's the purpose? What's the problem you're trying to solve? So lots of people started to pull on agile mindset and methods to start to solve business problems. In many ways, the pandemic has just accelerated that. And we've kind of jumped to a position where the digitalization of the employee and customer experience has just kind of, happened overnight. What we thought would happen for another 5 years has just happened overnight. So now I think we're really in the middle of the kind of future ways of working. We're kind of co-creating it together. And we need kind of some tools and techniques to really help us do that in an effective way. And that's why we wanted to explore OKRs today. The other key thing around this is how does HR play a role in that business agility? So how do we understand to put the customer at the heart of what we do and start to deliver value, through slices and incrementally into the business? Also, what does it mean to work in a more multi-skilled and what I call a T-shaped team to kind of deliver a holistic response to your customer and start to build that employee journey more like a customer experience, full of moments that matter. So that's what we're going to explore today and how OKRs can really play a role in that. I think we should probably define what an OKR is first. What do you think, Rahul? Just to kind of set the scene. So could you do that for us? How do you describe an OKR? And just give us a little bit of sort of, I suppose, background as to how they've kind of come about in the world of business.
Yeah, it's great to see already the definition on the screen, right? So maybe we can start there. OKRs stand for objectives and key results. Objectives are the qualitative goals that you're aiming to achieve. And the key results are then the quantitative aspects of that, where you want to measure your progress towards those goals. It's as simple as that. So in a nutshell, that's what OKRs stands for. That's what it means. In terms of history, it's been around for a while, for a lot longer than a lot of people might be aware of. It started off around the 1950s. A guy called Peter Drucker, might have heard of him. He created a framework called Management by Objectives, which gave birth to something like OKRs. So he developed that MBO, as it's called, framework, way of working. And it was picked up in Intel around the late 60s by Andrew Grove, who was the co-founder and CEO of Intel. And while at Intel, he sort of developed the OKR framework into close to what it is today. And then there's a guy called John Dewar who popularized it even more in the mid 70s, late 70s, when he worked for Intel, took the OKR framework from there, brought it to Google, and that is when it really became popularized into the framework that it is today. So at the end of the day, OKRs is just a goal-setting framework to help you set and measure goals. Excellent.
Thank you. Because I know that it's good to have a bit more history, because generally everyone said, it started with Google and then I went from there. And if you could just add a few comments at this stage around why is OKRs, being linked to business agility? So what is it about OKRs that's different to other maybe goal-setting frameworks that's been seen as more a better mechanism for business agility as opposed to the good old SMART goals, for example, or the more traditional ways that we did sort of strategy and mission and things like that? So what's your thoughts there, Rahul?
Yeah, I think the more traditional methods didn't make it so tangible as to what your goal is, as well as how are you getting there? Are you on the way or are you not? So OKRs I find to be great for that purpose because it's this framework to help companies, departments, and teams set those goals in a very non-binary fashion. And what that means is you can have different levels of achievements rather than just success or failure, right? Rather than just achieving a goal or not achieving it. And at the same time, OKRs also encourage top-down and bottom-up feedback, as well as this impact-first mindset and being able to respond to change by committing to some sort of an impact that you want to achieve in your business, in your organization, rather than committing to activities or projects or things that you want to do. Those come a little bit more down the line.
Okay, so tangible value, responsive to change, impact first, which I think is really interesting, and this idea of that, this non-binary, that you can have different outcomes, and that's actually okay because that's part of life and part of business, that you don't always achieve a target 100%. So it's more looking at why and what can you do differently next time. So Botho, love to bring you in now and also give a bit of context for everyone on the meetup. Can you tell us a little bit about the background of you using OKRs and at TomTom? And I suppose what's your initial thoughts on this link to business agility?
Yeah, for sure. So maybe I can give a few of the reasons on why we at TomTom decided to go for OKRs. I think there's a few reasons when we were looking at kind of changing the way that we work. So first of all, it was really around value. So we had a vision, but it was kind of a far away idea. And we were looking for a way to kind of bridge that gap between our daily execution and that vision. So we're looking for a way kind of what to help when somebody opens their laptop and they get a few requests in. How do they prioritize between what they're going to work on? And a vision is in that case not really concrete. I mean, it's good to have, but it's very far away on the horizon. And therefore OKRs was a real nice way to bridge that gap between that vision and execution. So that was one. And another one was kind of the idea that we wanted to change the way that we look at challenges and at problems. So we used to do strategy via a rumbled methodology where you have these coherent actions, which is basically kind of solutions that are hand-fed. And it's kind of saying, okay, this team, you do this, you build that. And it's not really a challenging way. So therefore, OKRs were for us a different way to look at challenges, and kind of made these from coherent actions, made them coherent challenges, which was a much more nicer way to look at challenges, and was in hindsight now boosting some innovation and creativity towards solving our challenges. And then the last one was that we were getting quite a bit of feedback from teams that they were looking at, they were missing some transparency of what others were working on. However, we were aware of a balance that you cannot be aware of everything that is going on, what other teams are doing, because then kind of your head is full of these things. So you kind of want to have a method to understand what are the most important things that some of these teams are working on and how are they progressing towards that. So therefore, that was the third reason for us to look at OKRs and to kind of see them and think, yeah, this is what we want to try out and start with. And now after these three reasons, I think in hindsight, looking back at your question, I think there's much more reasons, but let's stop at that.
So I think transparency is really interesting one, this idea of helping teams connect into a kind of, I suppose, a wider purpose, but also what other teams are doing and how you kind of understand that value stream. I think it's really a great point and something that we can kind of draw on. And I love this idea of the coherent challenge. So, what's the problem you're trying to solve and how are you going to go about it? And then what's your being your different kind of outcomes for that? And how do you learn from that? And I suppose for me as someone that kind of works across multiple companies, what I've really liked about OKRs, and Rahul, it'd be great to hear your comments on this, is it starts to bring in this cadence that actually is a feedback loop, which is kind of agile in itself, isn't it? What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think OKRs, if used the right way, can encourage this sort of sense of inspect and adapt, as we call it. So you go from not just setting goals and measuring them, but improving your process of implementing OKRs in your organization as well. But I don't think it's inherent to the OKR framework. I think this is something that needs to be taken care of by people in the organization. You often see roles like the OKR master or some sort of caretaker for the OKR process. It's really useful to have someone like that, especially at the beginning of your implementation cycle, so that they can suggest how to move forward with using OKRs and what sort of sessions you'll need and so on.
Okay. All right. So it's not a given that this natural, gorgeous feedback loop is just going to start. So that takes us definitely into our first question. But a shout out to everyone. Please let us know your questions. So we've got a series of questions that we're going to work through, and we're going to hear from Rahul and Botho on what is, what's the sort of good practice, and then what did it look like in practice. But if you've got very more specific things or any particular areas you want us to explore, please pop that into chat and we'll start to pick that up and move that into the conversation as well. So a question has just come into chat, which I think kind of fits very nicely with our first question. So it's got, what's the best way to deploy OKRs? And fancy that, our first question is to Rahul. Based on your experiences, what are the prerequisites for OKRs to be introduced? So before you even start the implementation, what kind of needs to be there in the first place, Rahul?
Yeah, this is a great place to start. I think a good deployment or implementation of OKRs really depends on a couple of key factors. And for me, there are 5 or 6 general prerequisites, so to say, that I like referring to. And one of them, Botho has already referred to, which is the need for having a product vision in place, right? And I'll go beyond that and say you need to have this vision, also the mission, and a strategy in place, right? So the vision is the ideal state you want to get to down the line, years down the line. The mission is more of what you're doing today to get to that. And then the strategy is a bit more of the tactics, right? What are the specific levers of impact that you're working on in order to achieve your vision as a team, as a department, as an organization? So for me, that's one of the prerequisites, because OKRs are derived from these things. They're derived from vision, mission statements, and a good strategy. And if you don't have that in place, what I find a lot of times in my line of work is that I work with the leaders and the management in defining them the right way to make sure that we can then create OKRs that make sense and that are useful for everyone. Another prerequisite, I think, is the need to have collaboration in co-creating the goals and measures between all parties that are working on the product. So not just a team or department that's setting those goals, but also the other areas, the other teams in the company that would be supporting them, right? They need to be involved in co-creating these goals and measurements so that they can have complete ownership as a group of the tools and systems that you're going to use to build your product or your service. As well, you need to have measurements in place, right? And if this is your first time implementing something like OKRs, you might not have ways of measuring the key results, right? And that's okay. But it's important to build those through different initiatives, through different projects, so that the following quarter you can improve and you have a set of measurements, ideally automated, so that they can help you find out whether you're on track to achieve your objectives or not. A couple more prerequisites for me that are important is you need to have this experimentation mindset, right? Because with something like OKRs, you're committing to the impact that you want to have by achieving certain goals. You're not committing to specific activities or outputs like projects, tasks, etc. Right, and this is one of the benefits of something like OKRs, is that those activities and outputs can be changed, can be trashed, can be reprioritized if at the end of the day, the new ones help you achieve your key results and your objectives in a better, easier fashion. So having said that, the management as well as the teams need to be open to giving individuals and people working on the objectives the ability to solve problems, right? So there shouldn't be this sort of list of tasks or list of projects that management gives the teams top down and says, these are the things you're going to work on, create OKRs out of them, right? That's the opposite. We want to switch that paradigm and start with the ability to solve problems so that the people that are coming up with those OKRs can help define those problems as well as help give more information about what and how to solve them as well, right? And lastly, for me, it boils down to having radical candor, right? This openness to share what's working, what's not working, without fearing consequences from your peers, from management, right? So you need to give this feedback openly within the framework. And once you have these things in place, then for me, it's a really good platform to implement something like an OKR framework in your setting.
Wow, excellent. So basically, vision, mission, strategy already kind of happening. There's some kind of process around that. People are talking about it. It's known. Then co-creation, so the ability to co-create the OKRs. Experimental mindset, so it's about solving problems, not delivering projects. And then the idea that you can actually give feedback, talk about not hitting targets, and look at how you can continuously improve. That last one is one that I think everyone constantly works on. Doesn't necessarily always have that in the first place. So, Botho, did these exist at, when you went and started to implement it, and therefore it was super easy?
Well, I laugh, but I think back of a nice ride. Yeah, so maybe first a statement from my side. So I personally think that actually OKRs are quite a lightweight thing, and it's something that is grasped quite easily. But then the execution of it is a bit harder and takes a while longer. And I generally also really see it as a philosophy as well as a methodology, because you don't need to kind of put yourself in a box and say, okay, these are the rules we need to follow. You can adapt here and there to what works well for you and your team, which is nice, but also sometimes makes it hard because it's nice to follow some of the guidelines. But I think Rahul mentioned some really, really good things that I also saw in TomTom. So some of them we had, which was really nice. So for instance, the vision and the mission. This was really great to have. And I definitely recommend to have that first, or have that in place before you start your OKRs, and don't kind of do it the other way around. And another one is the leadership backing. And this is something that in TomTom we had to work on a little bit. That leadership backing is really, really important. And I would actually spend a bit of extra time on, if you start with OKRs, to make sure that your leadership understands why and is also kind of a champion of that. So that one is important. And one last one that I want to mention is kind of having this. It's not a prerequisite, but it really helps if your company has this kind of idea of an experimental mindset, or has this culture of kind of low risk aversity. But when there's high risk aversity, beware that you may need to do some extra training or some extra massaging to get this work well. Because one of the things which is really good from the OKR methodology is that this way of experimenting is kind of pushing you to kind of go beyond of what you normally would say to do, to be really ambitious. And if you have a culture that where failing is frowned upon, this is going to be harder to get all of the benefits out of OKR. So I think that OKRs can be a mechanism as well to kind of train this and to develop this, and as well as kind of the candor and the trust. It can really be that mechanism to leverage that. but it is good to be aware of, hey, where does my company stand, and how much pre-work do we need to do before we start with it?
Yeah, I know that sort of links back to what Rahul was talking about a bit about that experimental mindset, isn't it? So that idea that things aren't absolute and that you see how you go against your key result and that ultimate objective. And then you learn from that and you look at how you get better at that, as opposed to, oh my God, we've missed our target and we don't want to talk about that and we need to try and cover it up, or we just set a different target for next time without kind of learning from it. So I think that's really important, that it gives you data to work with and how to solve problems rather than the absolute target. Excellent. So we've got some great questions. I think it would be useful to talk, Rahul, about sort of the next section, because that kind of ties into some of the questions, and then I'll bring some of the audience ones in. Can you tell us a bit more about how OKRs link to the business and the product strategy? So sort of that link for everyone. And then we've got quite a few questions on sort of the links with kind of teams and kind of bottom up and the metrics, which we can start to cover after this.
So you've got a few things in there, right? So with OKRs and business and product strategy, in my opinion, the order should be business strategy should then feed into the product strategy, which should then feed into the goals and the measures that you set with OKRs, right? So just to define them a little bit, for me, a good business strategy includes things like a unique value proposition, right? What differentiates your offerings from those of your competition? Maybe you're creating a unique value chain for the structure that doesn't exist in other companies and other markets. It should also help you make clear choices, right, about things to pursue, problems to solve, as well as a good understanding of what not to do, right? So a business strategy should help you ask these questions, but also give you guidance on these things, and as well as continuous improvement, right? Things like that to realize what the strategy can evolve into. So for the business strategy part, I think that's sort of the highest level I would put it. And that can be met through different business models, for example, and different approaches, right? So when one of those drafted business models, for example, encounters this fit, the product market fit or favor in the market, that's when you can say your strategy is successful, right? So product strategy, on the other hand, this is more of a subset of the business strategy for me. And it includes things like the markets and needs, right? The target users for your product, for your company, and their main problems that you're trying to solve. As well as things like your key features that you're building in your product, right? Going back to the value proposition bit and the business strategy, this is very similar. So what aspects of your product do you expect to help with the user's problems? And this is not a mini backlog, right? Or a wish list of things that you want to deliver. It's really from the customer's point of view that you're thinking about for these key differentiators. And a product strategy for me as well should include business goals, right? So not just the things, the customer problems that you're solving, but also how is solving those problems helping you achieve whatever your business goals may be, right? So with something like a product strategy, it's important to be very clear on what your business goals are, and as well as what indicators you're looking at, what KPIs you're looking at to measure your product's performance. A very simple example is something like an iPhone, right? When you compare the iPhone to Google Chrome, let's say, right, the browser that a lot of people use, the iPhone generates probably the largest percentage or portion of Apple's revenue, or very close to it. Yeah, one of the top two. Chrome, on the other hand, doesn't make any money for Google, right? But it still allows the company to control the way people access the internet, and it's reduced the dependency for Google on third-party browsers, right? So your product doesn't always have to have some sort of a financial benefit. Yeah, it could also enable you to create other sub-products. So this is what I mean when I say product strategy and different key differentiators in your product. Now, OKRs come under that, right? So once you have some sort of strategy in place, OKRs help you set those goals, right? They help you make the connection, like you were talking about earlier, Natal, between what you're trying to achieve in the longer term, as well as a more tangible way and a more measurable way to execute your strategy and translate them into the tactics of day-to-day work, right? So I see OKRs as this enabler of a good product strategy.
Excellent. It all sounds so simple when you talk us through, Rahul. I'm like, yeah, I could go and run a business using that approach. Easy. Well, we all know in reality it's a little bit more complex, but I think that was a really nice example, bring it to life. And I think for people on the core that come from the world of sort of HR, people and culture, I think it's really good to think about how, what's our product strategy? How does that fit into that business strategy? And what does that look like? And how would that throw through to OKRs just as much as business teams' OKRs? And how we kind of position that from a customer point of view. So I think that's a really good thing. And I know we've got someone on the line also that works for more of a non-for-profit. But it's the same approach, isn't it, Rahul?
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually worked with a couple of nonprofits in the past and helped them define OKRs. So, it's even more important for you as well to identify what are those key levers for your organization and how to measure impact towards them, right? So that you can not only solve the needs of the people you're supporting, your target audience, your customers, but as well survive as a nonprofit and continue doing the work that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
So making these connections help you do that in a very sustainable way.
So, Botho, love to hear what your thoughts are on this link to business and product strategy. So, when you brought OKRs into TomTom, and it's a couple of years now that you've been using them, isn't it? And how that's gone over that time and that connection to the business and product strategy, which I know has evolved quite a lot in that time as well.
Yeah, for sure. So we've been using it now for about 1 full year in TomTom. However, there's teams who've been using it for 2 years. So, but before we had a full company rollout, we had some teams practicing it first, getting to know it, and then after, when they had their good results and had some exciting stuff to share, then we rolled it out with the entire company, which is also a good way to do it for others, is to first test it out a little bit. Yeah, so this link between kind of the teams and product strategy has been something that we've been trying to steadily grow the past year. And what we tried is bringing actually these engineering teams that we have. Most of the teams in TomTom are engineering teams, and we try to kind of bring them much closer together with our product people. And I've really seen OKRs kind of be a help and a support in that, which is nice. So OKRs kind of changed the way how these two work together. And in a way, it used to be that our product people kind of came back from our customers with some requirements and then asked the teams to build those. And with OKRs, it kind of had forced them into kind of identifying much more customer needs and challenges and give that to the teams, which encouraged this experimental mindset, but also getting a much more ownership on, okay, what is it actually that we're trying to solve here, and how are we changing the lives of our customers. So in a way, OKRs have been really good for that link between business and product. However, I wanted to give an example of what we saw happening a lot with teams when we started with OKRs, is that you saw the teams set their key results, and mainly the engineering teams set key results that kind of exclusively gave them insight in how they were doing as a team themselves. But what was very often missing was kind of this link of seeing how do they as a team change kind of the behavior of their customer. So therefore, we said that we wanted to kind of force a little bit this idea of business and IT together, so the business and the software engineering together. And we did that through asking each team to articulate a key result where they would mention at least one of the business benefits into this key result. And this way it focused kind of the team to not only think about, okay, what are our metrics? So how many how many latency or bugs or etc., but also what in the end of the line, how does it change kind of, for instance, referral rates or users coming back to our products, etc. So when they start thinking about this, you see this link between kind of the IT teams or the software engineering teams and product becoming stronger. So yeah, I think that can be a tip as well when you're working on OKRs, to always look within those key results to see if it's connecting what you're doing to kind of the business or the product strategy.
Yeah, excellent. And also Botho, HR has OKRs at TomTom, don't they? What's your thoughts on how it helps HR connect to sort of the business strategy and the product strategy?
Yeah, that was actually a massive mindset shift because especially in the beginning when we were looking at, and Rahul has mentioned, is one of the prerequisites to kind of have these metrics in place. So we had some metrics, but yeah, with OKRs, it kind of really forced us to think about, okay, but how is this changing anything for the people at TomTom? So we were looking first very much output focused things. So how many trainings do we deliver? How much, do we make sure that all of our communication kind of lands at the people? So when we communicate something of HR, this is when we thought that we were done and everybody had seen that communication. And what actually changed, and it took a bit of time, right? It's not something that OKRs are not a silver bullet here, but it really helps. And how it is now is that it is much more outcome focused. So when teams are setting their key results now, it's no longer, okay, how many trainings do we deliver or do we reach everyone with our communication? But it's much more, okay, do we see a behavior change in the people who actually followed that training or followed that course? Are they reporting that they're doing something different because of what they've learned? But also, do we see if we build a program in HR and we deliver that to the business, it's not that we're done then, but then when we see our first users using that, that means that we have actually built something that is usable, etc. So it was a learning journey for us. And especially in the beginning, we saw these really output focused key results, but that is changing, and you need to be sharp on that and do your kind of your retros. But you see that changing much more to changes in behavior and outcome.
Great. No, that's really useful. And I just think it's a great tool for every part of the business, not just the product teams, on how you become more this outcomes focus. So guys, if you're up for it, I'm going to switch into some of the questions that have come in from the audience, and then we'll come back to some of the ones that we had. Over to you first, Rahul. So that I'll put it into chat. I sort of copied them out, but this is the first one. So one around, our organization can't get the bottom up aspect of OKRs going. So it's still seen as this top down kind of approach and solution. What's your kind of reply to that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's also not uncommon to see as well. I would go back to something that Botho had said earlier about management, right? So when you are rolling out OKRs in an area of your company or in your company, it's really important to have buy-in from management, and also make sure that they're trained, right, about how to create OKRs in the right way, how to use them in the right way, not use it to micromanage, not use it to spread their own agendas and so on. So I think that's a big piece of it, right? Making sure that the management has an understanding and buy-in into how you want to use OKRs in your company. Having said that, I would really start with, why is it that the bottom-up aspect is not really there? Is it because you're not leaving space in your OKR implementation, for example? You're not inviting your team members to the sessions where you're coming up with these key results? Are you not taking their feedback in terms of not just the key results, but also the initiatives that they could work on to help move towards the impact that you want to drive? Or is it just because that they're blocked, right, by other team members, by management, and so on? So there could be different reasons for this. I think the two more common ones are the ones I've mentioned, where either it's management pushing down, right? This is our OKRs, do something about it, right? Figure out what activities need to be done in order to meet the impact. Or maybe it's lack of maturity in terms of rolling out an OKR process, right? Not being able to involve all the different teams. Sometimes working in silos as well encourages this, right? When you have a key result per team or an OKR per team, it encourages the siloed mindset. And what you want to do is have a more general objective and key result, maybe at the department level, so that teams can contribute to different key results and work together with the other teams, so that they're not so much just thinking about us versus them. Yeah.
No, I think that's a really great point. And yeah, how can you, a little bit similar to what Botho was just talking about, how can you actually put into the OKR kind of formatting itself this link with other teams to kind of make that more of a joined up approach? I'm going to sort of jump around some of the questions. We'll do this one first because it kind of relates. So this question, I've kind of combined them. So what is your experience with OKRs for enabling teams? We're struggling with teams seeing their OKRs as a list of tasks that change too frequently in one quarter. And then the next question that I'm sort of combining is, what's your thoughts on changing OKRs mid-quarter? And I know that you actually made a change in TomTom about the kind of the sequence and the timing. So I just thought you could comment on that one first, and then I'll go back to Rahul to just see what he'd also add on that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think the second question, so what are your thoughts on changing OKRs mid-quarter? There's kind of two philosophies there. So there's people who say that you kind of really, when you set your OKR, you need to follow through, and if you don't set the right one, you can only change the next quarter. And there's people who say, well, yeah, what sense does it make to kind of chase down an objective or some key results that are no longer relevant? I think it's really one to use your head. So I would never kind of set yourself up in a way that you cannot change. I mean, I think that's very inflexible, but you do need to make sure that you learn of, okay, so what has happened here? So why do we need to change it? And maybe it could be, there's a new business reason coming in, or there could be some other things. And that could be very good reasons to change your OKR, because I don't think it makes sense to chase a key result or an objective that is no longer relevant. However, I definitely advise to not do that without doing a retrospective. It can even be a short one, but just to learn, hey, what did we do when we were setting this OKR, based on what did we learn, and how are we going to make sure that the next one that we set is going to be one that is going to stay relevant. So then the first question is, so what are your experience with OKRs for enabling teams? And we're struggling with teams seeing their OKRs as a list of tasks that change too frequently within one quarter. This is something that feels like it's like somebody said it at TomTom HR at least. So we started as well with a cadence on doing quarterly objectives and key results. And what we've noticed that with people metrics, before they change, it generally takes quite a bit of time. And of course, it has to do with being smart, setting up your key results in a way that you have leading and lagging indicators, which is a bit of a technical term. But leading indicators are indicators that you see as quickly as possible the results of your thing. So it can be users or views on a web page, etc. And you have your lagging indicators is really kind of a change in the happiness score at the end of a quarter. And we weren't that great in that from the get-go. But even when we got better in that, we still saw that this cadence was quite quick for us. So what we've done in TomTom HR is that we've changed our cadence and our rhythm to set half-yearly objectives and key results. However, with this quarterly kind of check-in to see, hey, are we going the right track? Do we need to change anything to our key results? Do the values need to change within the key results or not? But if everything is okay, we kind of go on. And that really helped. So I think if you feel that you're zooming in on a quarter, this often feels like then that also your objectives and your key results become so small that they feel like a task list. Then looking at a bit of a longer cadence without losing kind of this check-in halfway through the half year, so every quarter, I think that could be a potential good solution for that, or an idea at least.
Yeah, excellent. No, that's great. And we've got to thank you in the chat there. So, Rahul, we're going to move on to tracking OKRs. And what I'm just going to actually also just say to everyone online is that I'm going to sort of wrap it up officially, but then stay on the line with Rahul and Botho and just clear out the questions, because if you've asked a question, we always like to make sure you've got an answer. But if you do need to go at the past mark for another meeting, not a problem, just drop off, but we'll stay on and kind of finish out the questions. Rahul, so if you think if it's good to add anything to what Botho just said around the kind of lists of tasks, please do. And then I'd like for you to go into the next main question, because this was something that we wanted to talk about, and also I know you're working on, is what tools do you use to track OKRs and progression? So just sort of some comments on that one.
Yeah, so just to add to that previous question real quick, I would agree with what Botho said about the ability to change these OKRs. I think what's important is to find out why you're changing them and then make that call, right? The question about the enabling teams, that's a good one. I think is worthy of a couple of sentences.
Yeah, for sure.
I think with a lot of the enabling teams, you see that they're stuck into the habit of getting a list of requirements from teams from different markets and executing on them, right? That's okay. But if you really want to drive forward a product or service that you're owning, then really think about your users and your different levels of users, right? So not just the teams that you are supporting or enabling, but also others in the organization, as well as the end users or the customers. So thinking about those different layers helps you as well come up with more specific objectives and key results that you may be able to target for a shorter period of time, like a quarter or so. And to move on to the next question, what tools do you use to track OKRs and progression? Look, I think there are different tools out there. Different organizations use different things. I've seen organizations just use Excel sheets and it works fine for them, right? Because it's this sense of transparency that anyone can view that Google file, for example, right? So keep it lean, keep it simple. Don't try to go for fancy tools. What's more important is how you're using it, right? How often you're reflecting on your objectives and your key results, how often you're seeing whether those key results are being moved, right? The needle within them are being moved. What I suggest, especially at the team level, is when they're doing, for example, they're planning for the week. If you're using Scrum, they're sprint planning. Start with the key results. Start with the roadmap that you have, right? Talk about what subset of it can you really do in this upcoming sprint. And then that helps drive this impact first mindset as well. And something like a KPI tree is also very useful, specifically for those key results, where you start off by identifying what your North Star metric is as a team, and then breaking that down into smaller and more specific measures that are then easier to see. Botho mentioned the lead and the lag measures. You can incorporate that into something like a KPI tree, starting off with the lagging measure and then coming up with leading measures to see how you can impact, how you can influence the lagging metrics and so on. So there are different tools out there. Use the simplest, the easiest for you. I've seen a few people list them in the chat. But at the end of the day, you want to really be conscious of whether it's helping you use the OKRs and whether you're looking at them every week, every other week, rather than just doing them at the beginning of the quarter and then doing that next quarter.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a few people. We've got BetterWorks. Anyone using BetterWorks? Cohen, is that how I say that one? Miro, of course. Everyone loves Miro. I'm rather than a Christmas tree, I'm going for a KPI tree now this year, Rahul. And there's something called 7 Geese. Is that, I don't know, and Botho, do you use anything?
Yeah, so we at TomTom we started out using Miro as well, or Miro, and then now we're using GTM Hub. But I can attest to what Rahul is saying. I think the cadence is really the difference between kind of goal achieving, and it's not going to be the tool that you use, but it's really going to be, do you check in on your results? do you learn about them, but do you also celebrate those small wins when you get there? So I think that cadence is really going to make the difference. Yeah, and I don't know how many people will drop off. We'll stay on for some questions, but feel free if you need to drop off and you do have a question. You can always send me a DM on LinkedIn, and we can chat a little bit further. So feel free to do that.
So what I'm going to do, we've got 4 questions that we're going to go through because they were the outstanding ones. We're going to say a kind of thank you for anyone that does need to head off. We've got you were 3 rays of sunshine today. Have a good afternoon. So isn't that lovely? So you've got the LinkedIn details for Rahul, Botho and myself up there. Please stay in touch and you can drop us a message. As you know, you can go and visit Rahul at his website and definitely check out his podcast. He interviews awesome people and you can learn lots. And of course, come over to PXO Culture and in particular, stay in touch with our newsletter, which I'm just putting into chat now, to learn all about our next meetups and how you can keep learning about all these fantastic questions. So let's just go back to the questions that came in. So the next one, I think we should do, well, this is one for you, Rahul. How can external consultants help with OKR implementation, not the first implementation, but upgrading the process and educating the people in the company? From consultant to consultant, what's your ideas there?
Yeah, that's something that's sort of close to my heart and close to what I do. It really depends, right? What phase do you come in, right? When you go into an organization, what are they struggling with? What are they doing really well? Right. So it's always helpful to make that assessment, not just by yourself, but in conversation with the leadership team that is requesting your help or that's bringing you in as well. In terms of helping them with the implementation, I think one of the things that is valuable for an external consultant is to have different tools, different methods, right? Being aware of what works where, in which context. What I try to keep in the back of my mind when I do this is not using a formula or not using a template that has worked for me in terms of implementation in the past and applying that same template to every other company, right? Because every company is different, their needs are different. What they're trying to do with OKRs is as well different. So to give you an example, you may, for example, go in and see that there is a need to focus more on the product strategy part of it, right? And if that's something that you can contribute to, bring that up in conversation with leadership before you commit to helping with the OKRs, right? So I try to adopt this more of a systemic view of, not just going in there to help them with the OKRs, but really figuring out why are they trying to use OKRs, how is it helping them, and then assessing some gaps, right? Especially upstream with things like the strategy, the vision, the mission of things that you can help them with before you go into OKR so that you're tackling the root problems and you're tackling things from a more systemic point of view rather than just going in, executing and helping them set up a cadence.
A more holistic approach, which I think is good consultancy, Rahul. So next question, and I will go to Botho first because I know you've been there recently, and then Rahul, what you'd like to add. But how much training does implementing OKRs take?
Yeah, nice question. Not a lot, actually. There's even teams who did it without much training, but you do see a difference in kind of the uptake and how quickly teams get the benefit from it. So I would recommend one training, just can be maybe 1.5 hours, just for people to show kind of, okay, what is the philosophy? What are we trying to achieve here? And how could it help? And how does an OKR work? And how does it differ from having regular goals? And I think if people have a general understanding of how it works, then I think the learning by doing can kick in. So I've seen both sides. I've seen teams starting with it because the methodology looks quite easy on paper, and it is, but when actually executing, it becomes a bit more tricky. And I see those teams that they generally take longer for kind of getting the benefits out of it, but also feeling a bit more quickly demotivated by a task list or not seeing kind of why they're doing it. So if you can, I would just give teams a training, 1.5 hours maximum, maybe have them set an OKR about cooking just to try it out, something like that. That's something that I did with my teams in HR. So I asked them after the training, at the end of the training, set an OKR about cooking or about something else. And then you see that they kind of understand it, but then they see also what the subjectivity is. So if you say, okay, we want to become awesome cooks, then the word awesome is nice to have in your objective. But then when you get to your key results, then you kind of really have this discussion on, okay, well, what does awesome mean to you? I mean, for me, it could mean that I could cook an egg, and for Natal, maybe you need to make your pasta al dente. Who knows? But this is kind of where you get to the gist of it, and also have these good conversations. So if you have the opportunity to train a team on that and seeing that at least once before they get into it, I think that can maybe really make a difference. And there's one more quote that I always told in the trainings to my teams, saying that you can kind of introduce OKRs as a vegetable, as you would do like a vegetable to a kid. So it's not always nice from the beginning, but it's good for your body or good for your team, and that kind of helps them to think about, oh yes, it takes a bit of extra time because we need to talk about where we're going, but actually those conversations are the most valuable. So that I would recommend one training. So quite lightweight.
And definitely my egg would be poached, Botho. So just want to clarify that. Yeah.
So that's an awesome cook for you.
Fantastic. So this will be our last question. We did have one around tools, but I think we closed that one out with the discussion that we had. So Rahul, I'm going to send this one your way, but if you do want to add anything onto the training aspect before you get into it, please do. But final question, how do we make sure OKRs don't stand in the way of cross-functional collaboration?
A comment on the previous question as well. So it depends a bit on the trainer as well, right? If your trainer has as well been in the trenches and experienced it in different contexts, I think a training, as Botho mentioned, that's 1.5 hours long might be enough. I think in general, implementation of OKRs doesn't just depend on training, right? It's a very simple framework to understand, but the challenging part, as Botho referred to, is the practice and is out of the lessons you learn. So, don't expect it to work in the first implementation of it, the first quarter, or the first 2 quarters. Use it as a way to build up your process and to continue improving it and making something that's more useful for you in your context. And for the last question, I think this is something that I touched on earlier, where setting OKRs at different levels can be useful over here, right? So I've experimented in settings where we've set OKRs at the department level, at the domain level, and at the team level, right? And sometimes that's a little bit of an overkill. Yeah, and what happens is people find it very hard to connect the OKRs at the team level to the OKRs at the department level to the OKRs at the unit level or domain level. Right. So I would suggest starting with a very lean approach where you set it maybe at the unit level. You see if it makes sense, again, depending on the complexity of the unit, the number of people involved and the product you're building. If it is a more simple setup with 3 to 5 teams, right, you don't need to maybe set OKRs at the team level as well, right? Keep it simple, come up with initiatives or tasks and projects at the team level to help contribute to the key results at the department level. And what that does is it encourages this cross-functional collaboration between teams, between members in the teams. So they're not just thinking about, these are the things that I'm working on and that is for the other team to work on. They're really trying to think about the impact first and think, what can our team do to contribute to this key result or to contribute to this impact that we're after? Yeah, and it creates less of this us versus them mindset and dependency tossing between the teams and areas.
I think that's really great advice. Excellent. So we have moved through our questions and I've learnt lots and I've taken loads of notes and we had some nice shout outs, guys, of this was informative and definitely useful. Of course, we were 3 rays of sunshine, which just has made my day. So Over to you both to sort of say a couple of words just to wrap up. Rahul, any messages to send everyone off with about OKRs?
I would echo what I said just now. When you implement OKRs, don't expect for it to sort of be perfect from the get-go in the first quarter. It's a process that evolves. The important thing for me is to use what you've learned in this quarter, right, through your trial and error, through what you think was successful, what was not successful, to build on that in the upcoming iterations, right? So typically it takes organizations up to a year before they settle on a more permanent cadence that works for them. So don't be disheartened if you see that this is not working immediately. It's important to keep reflecting and keep adapting that, to build your own process and take pieces from others in the industry that you're reading about, that you're hearing about. Continue along to make your own process.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah,
and
I can.
Botho, any final words?
Yeah, so final words. I think it's a similar fashion. So whatever you want to say is, get ready to fail big. I think that's the thing. And I think, let's be honest, we all hate to fail, but OKRs aren't really there to kind of make yourself or ourselves feel good about hitting targets. And I think it's really about learning kind of what we are capable of as teams and as organizations. And I think you really need to see those failures as a kind of a positive indicator of stretching, and who knows where you can go after a few fails and where you might end up at. So get ready to feel big.
And on that note, thank you so much. I can see from the amount of questions we got and people staying on, this is such a big topic for people. And as I said, I've learnt loads, so I know everyone else has. And please reach out to Rahul to learn more about how he can support you in that OKR journey. And definitely get in touch with PXO around our next meetups and our boot camps and how we can help you in HR along this journey as well. So thank you so much for your time. Lovely to have you join us, and have a great day, and hopefully the clouds clear where you are.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.